Hi, I'm Karima Brown. It's Sunday and it's time for The Fix. First up, we get under the skin with Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan.
Please leave.
We dig deep and look at why the EFF is so determined to get rid of the man President Ramaphosa has tasked with leading the charge to clean up SOEs. Then we look at the demand made by more than 30 organizations to make 2020 the year of the orange overalls. We speak to former Constitutional Court Judge Johan Krichler about the call to up the ante against corruption and to hold accountable those responsible for state capture. And as is custom, we take a look at what's made headlines in the weekend newspapers and why. The Fix starts now. President Cyril Ramaphosa was candid about the power crisis in his SONA speech, admitting on Thursday that it has a debilitating effect on the economic life of South Africa. He promised the state that he will fix Eskom. However, he said very little about the struggling state-owned entities such as SAA, SA Express Denau and PRASA, among others. Well, joining me to unpack how SOEs will be managed to drive economic growth is Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan and Economist Dr. Iraj Abedian. Gentlemen, welcome to The Fix. Now, before we go into the questions, let's just quickly take a listen to President Cyril Ramaphosa speaking during the SONA address with specific emphasis on SOEs and Eskom.
We are working to ensure that all SOEs are able to fulfill their developmental mandate and that they should be financially sustainable. In consultation with the Presidential SOE Council, we will undertake a process of rationalization of our state-owned enterprises and ensure that they serve strategic, economic and developmental purposes. The extent of state capture and corruption and mismanagement in SOEs is possibly best demonstrated at South African Airways, which was placed in business rescue late last year. The business rescue practitioners are expected to unveil their plans for restructuring the airline in the next few weeks. In the interest of South Africa's aviation industry and our economy, it is essential that a future restructured airline is commercially and operationally sustainable and is not dependent on further government funding.
Well, that is President Cyril Ramaphosa, of course, on Thursday. Let's go straight into what he also said, Minister Gordhan. He said, in line with the roadmap announced last year, Eskom has started with the process of divisionalizing its three operating activities: generation, transmission and distribution, with each of them having their own structures. How does generation fit in with the fact that a fifth window has now been opened to independent power producers, as well as the President saying to business and municipalities that they can now generate their own electricity?
Well, at the moment, Eskom theoretically has, and forgive me, I've got a bit of laryngitis, 46,000 megawatts of energy. In practice, as we said today and now, there's some 27,000, 28,000 megawatts that are actually available. So there's a gap between demand and supply. Secondly, in relation to climate change and reducing carbon emissions, it's important excuse me, that we begin to move towards renewables or low carbon emission forms of energy. Thirdly, the reality is that it's going to take time to fix Eskom, and we need extra measures so that we can cover this gap between the demand and the actual supply for our economy and for our citizens as well. And that is where the efforts of Minister Matrash in terms of allowing for self-generation at a small scale, 1 megawatt, 10 megawatts. Secondly, allowing, for example, mining companies to even get into higher levels of self-generation. Thirdly, allowing municipalities where they have the capability to enter into IPPs or other forms of generation as well. And that then begins to create a mini energy revolution in South Africa over the course of the next year or so. And it's quite critical that in the next 6 to 12 months, we meet the energy requirements of our country. Otherwise, my colleague on the panel will tell you that there will be an even more severe negative impact on the economy, apart from the irritation and the disruption that lack of electricity actually causes. So these are all efforts, including Window 5, to begin to increase the amount of energy available in the South African context, and at the same time undertake an energy transition, and at the same time undertake a structural transition where Eskom, as we know it, will begin to be separated into generation, transmission, and distribution as well.
Iraj, I see you nodding your head. Are you in agreement with the way in which Minister Pravin Gordhan has outlined how it's supposed to work and the timelines?
I'm nodding my head because I said thank you at last. Because remember, by not doing these things, because we always focus on problems of divisionalizing or restructuring, but we have to ask what would happen if we don't do it. And if we don't, and because we haven't done it over the past few 6, 7 years, 150,000 jobs have been lost. The economy has ground to a halt, literally. Apart from the pain that it puts on the citizens, job losses, income losses, people in the patients in the hospitals being literally dying, etc., etc. So I'm in agreement, yes, at last. But we need to also recognize that all of this will take our economy to 2%, 1.5%. That is not enough. We've got to do a lot bolder initiatives to set this economy at a globally competitive, energy-wise, environmentally compatible growth levels of 5% and more. Now, it's a good start, but quite frankly, if we compare it with a lot of other successful countries that governments go out subsidizing, never mind freeing the market, and I don't for a moment believe that we need subsidy. Let me just also put that absolutely right. But we need to get out of the way. We need to enable the economy to create jobs, to have energy which is from all fronts. We are blessed with enough sun, enough this, enough that, but we are not using them because we are stuck in one sentence. Eskom is too strategic and is too big to fail. Energy is, for me, energy is strategic. We should not fail to make it available for the economy.
Minister Gordhan?
No, I agree. But we must also ask the question, what are the contributors that will take us to 5% growth? So energy, absolutely no doubt, is a critical factor, as are skills in our economy, infrastructure, lowering the cost of doing business, higher levels of efficiency at our ports and in our railway system. And we often forget that 70% of our economy is in the control of the private sector. So it's also about, on the one hand, government generating enough confidence in the economy, but the private sector also demonstrating confidence in its own economy and in its own country as well. And I think that is where the recent efforts at compacting through the NEDLAC mechanism hopefully begins to create conditions where we stop pointing fingers at one another and get on with the business of investing, creating the right kind of infrastructure, establishing the right kind of confidence, but putting money in the ground at the end of the day. And with the African free trade or continental free trade agreement,
yes,
a whole lot of opportunities are opening up for South African business backed by government at the end of the day. And those opportunities must be utilized in a positive kind of way.
Talking about money, Iraj, the COSATU plan, I interviewed the COSATU president just before SONA about harnessing pension funds of government employees. Now, we saw the president speaking about the fact that there's a need for a social compact around that. But just before SONA, the PIC issued a press statement saying that workers shouldn't worry, that they won't invest recklessly. Do you think that the SONA on Thursday, endorsed COSATU's plan, or do you think that we are still in the process of negotiations?
I think it's endorsed conditional upon certain principles being in place. I think that's an important point. Using any pension funding for long-dated investments of infrastructure nature is not necessarily a bad thing. But it presupposes, and this is where COSATU, in my view, and I listened to your fix last week, they are a bit too shallow, because they think Eskom's problem is money. Eskom's problem, now that we know, is not money, is anything but money. Get the rest of Eskom right, money is not a problem. Neither in the capital market, nor in the pension, local pension, not just necessarily COSATU members, even private pensioners would want to get the type of yield that Eskom would provide. But nobody is going to get that return unless you sort out the structural issues, the management issues. What the president, for me, in his SONA highlighted 2 points in SOEs that we have to focus on as a nation. One, and most important, is repurposing our SOEs. SOEs of 100 years ago is not SOE that's suitable today and going forward, be it SAA, be it Denel, be it any of them. The second one is rationalization. So if we focus on those first and then revisit COSATUs or private sectors, I've had discussions with the private sector locally, internationally. They would be very happy to be part of the finance, but fix it, money not first, money is the last. So I'm on that page.
Now, if we're talking about fixing, Minister, what obviously comes to mind is dealing with corruption, bringing the numbers down, because some of these institutions are in fact bloated, and of course also the fears of workers that they are going to lose their jobs. Let's take SAA, for example. It appears as if everyone is not on the same page. It's in business rescue. Both you and the President have come out and said the way in which the business rescue is happening should be reconsidered, particularly in terms of local routes. But you had someone like Minister Mantashe saying something completely different, saying sell off the airline. Why are you guys not on the same page? You sit in the same cabinet.
Let's just talk about Eskom first, and I'll come back to SAA. I think the word that Iraj missed out is operational fixes. The operations of Eskom must be the sole focus at the moment, so that we get inefficiencies out, get people with the wrong skills out, put people with the right skills in the right operational areas, improve the efficiency of the plant, ensure that when maintenance is done, it lasts. So we've now got technical data over the last week, and some of these analysts that have all sorts of commentaries about what do ministers do and why are you interfering? Well, we don't interfere. We check the micro details to understand whether the fix is actually the fix, forgive the pun. So we now have data which shows that even contractors who are supposed to do maintenance do a half-baked job, so that they can come back sooner rather than later and earn more money out of Eskom. So that's the focus of the CEO and the board now. Fix the operations. That will help us to get the finances right and stop the wastage. Review coal contracts, review IPP contracts, review contractors' contracts, or any procurement that takes place. And billions of rands are being spent by Eskom. And if you do that properly over the next 3 to 4 months, we'll be saving a lot of money for the state. As far as SAA is concerned, excuse me, the business rescue plan is still in the formation stages, number one. Number two, as the shareholder, government has the right to be consulted, and government has the right to make submissions to the business rescue practitioner, in as much as Labour or any other creditor has. Let's ask ourselves, how did we end up with business rescue? Our options were liquidation, leave it as it is, both of those would have been disasters, restructure the airline, or put it into business rescue. We said we'll put in a new management team to restructure. No sooner did we do that, the lender said, we will only lend you money if you put the airline into business rescue. Well, so in the early part of December, we are now in business rescue. Routes are an important part of any airline, and you must leave behind sufficient critical mass within an airline that you're even restructuring so that you can grow it again at some stage. And there's a government decision in this regard. This is not an individual decision, either of the president or myself or some other individual. And what we are doing right now is implementing the decisions of government.
All right, Minister, hold that thought. Iraj, I'm going to ask you after the break why Minister Mantashe seems to be singing from a different hymn book. We're going to take a short ad break to pay our bills. When we come back, we continue our conversation with Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan and Economist Dr. Iraj Abedian. Stay with us.